Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast, where we're going to piss off many fan bases today because, well, that's what we do. Hey, Casual, how are you, man?
Pretty good. Could have been
Are
better.
you doing better than Hamilton at the moment, yeah?
Yeah, I'm not as depressed.
Yeah.
Shout out to the people in India. Last week, whatever happened, I mean, it's public news.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Hope
I
things
joke
get
about most
better.
things, but I'm not going to joke about that. So let's
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Hope things
Yeah.
get better. And hope common sense prevails. So, yeah. On that front, let's move and let's talk about Formula One. And first of all, let's talk about the more peaceful things like the Max Verstappen penalty and
Penalty.
how
Oh, God.
amazingly everyone took it. I think the reason why I'm bringing this back is, look, there are people who go into an argument or into an incident already making their minds, and basically what they are trying to do is they're trying to reverse engineer the logic from it.
Yeah.
So
Let's just say the important thing first as well. I think a statement needs to be made by us, which is that, look, some new information has come to light, which is why we're talking about it again. And that information is really important. And sometimes people get things wrong. And that's why we're coming to you today to say that a lot of people got it wrong. We got it right. And the new rules clarify that.
basically the thing is, this segment is for the good faith fans. I mean, if you've already made your mind, I'm not even going to bother wasting even
Yeah.
a minute on you. The
My camera
entire
has
point
decided to
is we
give
are
up
going
as
to
well.
give you these. What the fuck happened to you?
My camera apparently is a huge Max Verstappen fan. And has decided
Oh
to...
god.
It's fine. It's fine.
You're
As long
back.
as you can hear
You're
me,
back.
it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason why we're doing it is there are a lot of good faith Max Verstappen fans as well that actually follow us and watch whatever we're doing. For them, this is important because look, this is just race 5. There are 19 more, and there will be a lot more incidents where something like this will come up. And for you
Yeah.
guys, I think it's important that at least you know the basics so that next time,
I
whatever
think is...
the incident is, you can take your own call.
And I think as well, just look, this is less about that penalty and more about the fact that we've gotten now a proper insight into, like, we kind of roughly knew what the rules have been changed to after kind of Qatar with the Austin and Mexico incidents last year. But now that we've got reporting from the race who've actually got their eyes on the real guidelines, we've got a much better idea of, okay, that's why that decision was made. And there's a couple of bits in these that I think, like, regardless of how you feel about the overtake penalty, it's probably important to understand because this is going to come up again, and there's a couple of clarifications here as that I think is going to cause a lot of shouting now because most fans don't want or care to look at these rules. No offense to them, that's fine if you are that way. I understand, like, we're nerds. Yeah. But I think there will be fans who will see an incident happen because of how Max races, which is aggressively, and we love how Max races, but he will cause himself to get a penalty in what will seem like a very similar situation. But when you read the rules, it will become clear as to why one got a penalty and why one didn't. So I guess maybe we should talk about the rule differences to explain them to people real quick. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll quickly read them out and then we can jump into what they were and what they are. Hey, just a quick interruption because we have a problem here, which is that for the last few months, we've been saying that if you're offended, subscribe. We've kind of been saying that. We've been saying if you're not offended, don't subscribe. It's the same thing. I'm sure you understand English if you're watching this, so you've got it, I'm sure. But turns out 60% of you have not been offended. And I just can't sleep. I don't know about you, Casual. I just can't sleep at night knowing that we haven't offended 60% of the audience. I think we need to start. You sleep okay? Well, I haven't because there are 7.5% of you are Indians that haven't been offended. For example, I think we just need to fix this. So I'm just going to take a minute of your time to just make sure that everyone watching this is thoroughly offended. So I've written down a couple of things, Casual, and you can tell me if you think this is offensive enough. So let's offend those Hindus and Indians first, quickly.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Oh, jeez, no, don't. Don't do that.
Is that too offensive? No? Okay.
You don't live in India.
Yeah.
And I'm not a Hindu.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that offensive? So that is offensive then?
That's not only offensive, that's going to get me lynched. So please don't do that.
All right. Well, I'll think about cutting it out afterwards. Is there? By the way, 15% of you watching are British, and I'd just like to say that your sports cars now are so gay that the best model, the best selling model, is the LGB GT. No? Offensive? No?
Maybe.
And of course, the 20% of Americans here, there's no need to insult you because you'll just do what you always do, which is show up after everyone else has done the hard work. So we'll probably cut that Hindu joke out, should we?
Yes.
Yeah. What I'll do is...
I'm still too young to die.
Okay. So... If you have been offended, please subscribe. If you haven't, then tell us how we can offend you and we'll subscribe you. And if a lot of Indian people subscribe, we'll maybe show you a behind the scenes of what that joke was at some point. Thank you, everybody. Now back to the podcast. So last year the rules were, and this was one of these was a surprise to us, right? The alongside the mirror bit we talked about before the podcast. So the rules last year were that basically when overtaking on the inside, there is different rules for the outside as well, but we'll focus on the inside here. The first was to have a front axle at least alongside the mirror of the other car, right? You don't have to be ahead at the apex. You just have to have your front wheels basically ahead of the mirror of the car you're overtaking. That was in place all of last year. We always thought it was ahead at the apex, but apparently this was last year's rule as well. Be driven in a safe and controlled manner throughout the maneuver. So basically not diving in essentially and not like pushing the other car wildly off track. Basically making sure your car is stable. If the other car goes off track, that's different. But if you're under control, you're fine. Then the third one was without deliberately forcing the other car off track at the exit. This is important to the Saudi conversation. And this includes leaving a fair and acceptable width for the car being overtaken from the apex to the exit of the corner. Again, that's the one that everyone was clamoring about for Saudi. And you'll see why it's important to note that when we talk about the new rules in a minute. And then be able to make the corner within the track limits. Again, I think these four rules are the ones we were looking at. And what I was a bit confused about, but then kind of made sense was he didn't really leave Max a lot of room. But then when you look at the other rules, Max also didn't really come in under control. Oscar was entitled to the corner. So it did make sense. But when you read the new rules that came into effect from January, immediately it's like, oh, well, then Max was screwed. Like, that was a slam dunk penalty. The new rules are simple. They are now 3 instead of 4 points. They have to, once again, have the front axle at least alongside the mirror prior to and at the apex, which Piastri did. He was ahead. Basically, Max led off the brakes. People can argue about that all they want. But, no matter what, at no point before and at the apex was was Piastri's front wheel not in front of that mirror. So that was that covered. Be driven in a fully controlled manner, particularly from entry to apex, and not have dived in, which Piastri didn't, because Piastri got a better start, so he was ahead. So it was actually at that point then Max trying to play catch up anyway. And obviously he was controlled because he made the corner, so that's the easiest way to do it. And then in the steward's estimation, this one's going to be fun, I'm sure, for people over the course of the season, because we know everyone loves the stewards. To have taken a reasonable racing line and been able to complete a move whilst remaining within the track limits, which Piastri did because he stayed within the track. Now, you'll notice the key here, which is why everyone talking about, Verstappen being forced off and so on, comes to nothing under these new rules, is there is absolutely no indication that the basically overtaking driver has to leave any room. So if you can make the corner, if you're not diving in, that's important. So if you're not like just letting off the brakes and trying to ram the other driver off, basically, which Piastri didn't, Piastri was under no obligation to leave any racing room for Max. So Max arguing he was forced off under these new rules don't make any difference. And just a final bit on this as well. There was a notable key sentence at the top of these guidelines, which says when an overtaking driver has priority, which Piastri did in this particular situation because of the rules, it is a responsibility of the defending driver to avoid a collision and essentially to just move out of the way, like basically. They are, what this boils down to, from my understanding of all this and from what the race are talking about, is they're basically trying to make overtakes more acceptable and make it harder for the defending driver. So basically a lot of the onus is, and a lot of the onus then is on Max. So under these new regulations, Max saying, I was forced off, doesn't matter, because as soon as he didn't make the corner and Piastri did make the corner, Piastri basically...
No. As soon as Piastri was at least alongside him,
his
the
mirror.
front axle was alongside the mirror.
Which
is stupid. First of all, that is the... Just to put it in the very... Sorry, go for it. You're saying something.
No, I was just going to say, like, this is one thing I think that people are going to have to be kind of very, very mindful of, is first of all the 33 on the car here, just to wind up some people. But no, like, I mean, like, even looking at a small model, you can see, like, there's a good bit of space there between the mirror and the front axle. So, like, I mean, if he has his front axle, his front wheel here, he's entitled to that corner as the overtaking car. So you were seeing a lot of people be like, oh, but look, I mean, you know, Piastri's here, like his front wing is here, for example. So, like, Max was ahead, but it's like under the new rules, as long as Piastri's front wheel is here, literally like all the way back, that's it. He's fine. He's overtaken. He has entitlement to the corner, and he does not need to leave any room for Max on the outside. Yes. He can push Max right off the track as long as he makes the corner. Yeah. So under the new rules, Max deserved a penalty. I think a lot of people are going to argue about these rules over the season. I think a lot of people, but
actually, it's not that under the new rules, Max deserved a penalty. Under the new rules, if Max had come out, even if he jumped Oscar, if he had just given up the position to Oscar, then that was fine. But he did not give back the position. That's why the penalty came in.
Of course, yeah. So it was actually not the penalty for going off. It was the penalty, for going off track and gaining a lasting advantage. That's what he got. So the penalty wasn't for just going off track. It was gaining the advantage, right?
Precisely.
Essentially, Oscar had gained that position, and so that's what it was for.
Essentially, what happened is once Oscar is at least alongside, he's P1. Max is not P1 anymore. That is how it should be actually interpreted. Because in that moment, the overtake is done.
Yes.
I actually had a discussion about this with Obbs, Dr. Obbs, and that was precisely the point where he kind of talked about the sporting regulations where you have to leave enough space for when you're trying to overtake. But the point is the overtake was done. He wasn't overcrowding anyone at that stage.
And just under these new regulations, you don't need to leave space. That's no longer a thing.
Exactly.
And I think that's probably the biggest thing that people, you know what annoys me, just a quick side note, the fact that the race had to go and get this secret document really irks me, because this would have been a much easier conversation if it's like, oh no, like if straight away afterwards under the regulations, because even the people doing analysis of it from F1 didn't seem to know that. Like, you know, so apart from Jolyon Palmer did say, no, as now that he's alongside, he doesn't have to leave room for Max. And a load of people were like, yes, he does. And if the FIA had just made these regulations public, immediately the argument would have been over, because it's like, no, he doesn't. He doesn't need to leave any room.
Exactly.
Like, there is no regulation for that. So,
any idea why they do not share it with the public?
I don't know. Like this, I'm not sure. Like, I guess, like the reason beforehand that I found was that basically we have the sporting code and the technical code, right? The sporting code is public. We can all read that, you know, the actual rules and regulations, which a lot of people again were quoting because the stewards put it in there, and it kind of, I got why they were quoting it, but again, now looking at these rules, it's like, yeah, what you're talking about no longer matters. He didn't have a justifiable reason under these guidelines, all of that stuff. The reason being basically these guidelines are guidelines, which means they are subject to change before they go into or they could be subject to change before they go into the final international sporting code, which can then be used in legal conversations if there's like a big problem, right? So they try and keep them quiet for that reason, but I just think it just causes more problems than it solves to do that. And like, I just, in my brain, my thinking is like, the moment that the stewards are using something to act on in a race, that should be public information. That shouldn't be a hidden document.
Precisely.
I know maybe it doesn't matter because the
It does.
teams and like F1 all have it, but for us as fans, it just makes these conversations really difficult because we're kind of
It
guessing
went
on
for
stuff.
1 week, by the way. The whole thing went for 1 week. But the reality, and again, it's not like the race was able to get the document from the FIA. It's John Noble having a few sources through which he was able to get that snapped or something. Somehow.
Basically, getting
Pretty much peak
someone
journalism.
to show
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Which I would guess, I would imagine that there was a lot of Red Bull. And like, this is the thing as well. Like, Horner came out and was like, oh, he didn't leave room. He wasn't. And Horner was like showing a photo which showed that Oscar had the corner under the new regulations. So this, I wouldn't be surprised if basically someone in McLaren is pissed off because Horner comes out, shows these images, and the guy in McLaren's like, but Horner knows the fucking rules. He knows he's wrong. Like, here's the fucking rules. I would not be surprised if it's just someone in McLaren being like, what is he
Could be.
doing? Show
course.
them the rules because he's lying. You know, he's trying to make us look bad.
You know what the biggest limitation here is? We only know when someone is trying to overtake on the inside. We still don't know what happens if they're trying to
We have
overtake
no
on the
idea.
outside.
Yeah, and also the other limitation here is that because most Max fans don't read the race because of British bias, they're probably also. I'm joking, but I guarantee the one thing that's going to come up again is that line. By the way, and like we talked about before the podcast, be driven in a fully controlled manner, particularly entry to apex, and not have dived in. And I know exactly what's going to happen. Maybe as soon as this weekend in Miami, Max is going to lunge in, get a penalty, and everyone's going to be like, but Piastri did the same. And like, no one reads the rules. So they're just going to be like, oh, you know, it's like, look.
Exactly. It's just, I don't know. I think there might be a time when maybe people start talking about FIA being a bit more transparent when it comes to these regulations. Because look, it serves no purpose. If that thing is there in front of us, it makes it easy for us to actually, have a grasp of what is going on. It shouldn't be me giving my arbitrary opinion, you giving your arbitrary opinion, and both of them might seem logical. But what are the regulations? What are the rules? If we don't know that, then
Because
it's
we're
a waste
like
of
guessing.
time.
We're guessing off regulations that we knew about from the paddock from kind of last year from talking to people that are completely irrelevant now because they've changed and no one's seen it. And it took, as you said, John Noble, like getting it from someone in a secret room somewhere. It's such, like, the thing is, if they just printed, like, as per the current guidelines, and it printed those three things in the stewards document, the whole, like, you still would have got people being like, oh, well, the FIA are biased against Max, sure. But the argument would have changed to a reasonable one, which is, I don't like these rules, which I'm fine with. That's a much more reasonable conversation of like, these rules are but when you don't print those, it just becomes, oh, well, if that had been Max, it would have been a penalty. And it's like, no, it wouldn't. Shut the fuck up. But I can't really argue with you either because as much as you're wrong, I get where you're coming from because you don't know the rules. So,
It's just the problem is, next time what's going to happen is Max is going to try and overtake on the outside.
Yeah.
And we don't know what the fuck happens.
Yeah, I'm going to not argue with it until the race goes and gets the documents again and then make my argument. Yeah.
That's what is left. Okay, just to, wrap the whole thing up and just, complete the circle. In case any of our watchers, you are trying to identify who is at fault or not, the first thumb rule is just look at where the front axle is compared to the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
That is your first eligibility criteria either ways. If
you would imagine that's on
ahead,
the outside as well, right?
I don't know.
We don't.
It should be.
We don't know, but you would imagine it's consistent. That like it's mirror front axle.
It should be, yeah. It should be. What I think what could be the case is if the driver on the outside has the mirror alongside the front axle, so in that case he's entitled to room.
Yeah.
In that case, he cannot be pushed off.
Yeah.
I'm assuming. Again, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
well, you would assume so, right? Because the whole point of these new ones that we just talked about for overtaking on the inside is basically they're trying to give, like, basically last year the big fuck up was the defending car basically had all the power because the defending car could just let off the brakes, roll
Max
in
and
deep,
Austin.
Max and Austin, and then what you call it? Then Lando played it the other way in Mexico by basically going, I'll just drive so I'm ahead at the apex, and once I'm ahead at the apex, I'm fine. But it was
Yeah,
kind of the defending car had more priority all the time, so you
yeah,
had to make a lunge
yeah,
essentially. Whereas now it's the opposite way, whereas the overtaking car has the priority, and it's up to the defending car to basically figure out, stay ahead in some way or
yeah.
the other.
I agree.
So yeah, I
I
would
hope so.
imagine that it's
Yeah,
like you said that the defending car, if the overtaking car is ahead at the ape or ahead of the mirror at the apex, they, as you said, probably can't be forced off. Like you have
yeah,
to leave them room.
yeah. Just
This is
giving
going to be
more power
messy
to the.
though.
Look, it takes a lot of time to explain, and the thing is, when it takes a lot of time to explain, it's it just what it does is if there is someone again, F1 is very high commitment sport for people because you have to really dig into the details. But not everyone is interested in doing that.
No,
Quite a
no,
few
no.
people are very much like on a very, very surface level, they are trying to judge things. And that's where things go wrong.
Which is
And
fine as well. There's no problem with that. Just if you are that person, don't try and get into detailed arguments with people who actually read the fucking rules. Like, just as a pointless thing
exactly,
to do. That'd be like me arguing maths with a maths professor. It's like,
yeah,
what am I doing here? Like,
exactly.
this is a pointless argument.
Bringing Google Maps and rubbish
Yeah.
arguments. Yeah, you know who you are.
Yeah, just to wrap this whole conversation up, one thing that did surprise me after reading these rules, to be honest, though, is the fact that not only Red Bull but also Max, because like to give Max credit, Max normally knows the rules inside and out.
Yeah,
So it is bizarre to me that he's like, oh, I've been forced off. When surely he knows that these rules have been updated. And the reason I say surely he knows these rules have been updated, for anyone wondering, these rules are they're finally
ratified by the
decided upon.
drivers.
Yeah. So it's not like this is like a new FIA rule that Max has never seen. He would have been in the conversations where they
Yeah,
decided them.
yeah,
So it just because like I say that straight. If this was like if Lance Stroll did that, I'd be like it's fucking Lance Stroll. But Max Verstappen Max Verstappen knows the rules inside and out all the time, and that's one of the brilliant parts of Max's driving. Like at Austin last year, we didn't say, "Oh, Max was at fault." Our immediate thing was, "Fuck, Max
rules
played those
suck.
rules, but these rules are shit." Like that was our argument, and
Yeah,
that's why it's bizarre to me that Max didn't seem to know the rules. So that, which is odd.
I have an argument for it.
He's trying to push
I
for different rules.
No,
Oh,
I think it's just the Michael Schumacher mentality, where you're never wrong, where you're
which is not a
basically
bad
never
thing.
wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked for him, and it kind of works for Max as well. So
Yeah.
it's just they are screwed differently, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
thing. They're just
Yeah.
different beasts when it comes to something like this. And yeah, I mean, it's understandable to a certain extent how he kind of goes about it. But the problem is when you tend to do that, the only people you are going to keep in your company is yes men. Other than that, anyone logical and anyone who is very objective in their thought, they are not going to be around you.
It
That's the
also
big
just,
problem.
I think it may, and he's probably like Max is quite good at this, so he may need to do this. But I think there may be perhaps a period of needing to adjust to going back to fighting from behind again, because before it was like, okay, I can push the rules because I've got an advantage, and that leaves the onus on the drivers trying to catch me because I've got like this 50-point lead. Whereas now he's not in that position, and maybe Red Bull and Max need to kind of readjust to that situation. And normally I'd say that's not really like that's not going to change because it's not how Max drives. But given his penalty point situation as well, like he was lucky not to get, because they hand out penalty points pretty quickly these days. So he was kind of lucky not to get a point or two there, and he's very close to a ban.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that Red Bull is probably having his back, and then at the same time being like, right, look, Max, maybe calm it down the
Earlier,
next
I
time.
used to think that Marco is the one who kind of, you know, sits him down and maybe sometimes give a bit of a dressing down when it's
Yeah.
needed. But when the whole thing came out where Max's manager was shouting at Marco, I think the dynamics have changed.
Yeah.
And maybe we are
Yeah.
not in a scenario. It happens. Your head grows bigger as you become more successful, right? So I don't know.
Should we touch on just quick before we move on his racing or his performance clause that the race been with John Noble and the new guy, like John Noble being there
John
and just
Noble is
in
a guy.
general, they are really like just on point with like uncovering all these details. I don't know if you saw they got a look at at Max's contract somehow, and he has a performance clause
Where
in
it
there.
is, he cannot be below P2, I think.
Yeah, by like June 12th or something, or July 12th. I can't remember which one. So literally like by the summer break, basically.
Yeah, we'll debate what he should do. We'll debate a bit on it later. What he should do.
Well, we've already done it kind of, but yeah, it just opens it up, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So what's next? The title picture, I guess we're talking about.
Yes. So okay. Do you think Oscar Piastri is the title favorite at this stage after 5 races, or are you of the view that people are jumping the gun already?
I think they're jumping the gun a bit too quickly because things were very early on. However, in my opinion, the title favorite is still Max, right? Personally,
yeah.
And I think that the difference between Lando and Oscar right now is kind of at the point where it's still too close for me. Regardless of, I know a lot of Oscar fans particularly will disagree, but it's still too close for me in the point of like I've seen Lando have these off days before. And then all of a sudden go on a binge of just like, okay, I'm just really going to destroy things one weekend. And because it's so close, like if we have a single I always get these confused. A single Singapore or Zandvoort situation, that swings heavily back again, like straight away. So yeah, I think it's too early.
Oscar clear DNF, right? Oscar gets the DNF and you're back. You're back where we.
Well, the thing is, like Oscar's willing to go toe to toe, like mentally clear, no problem with Max, and we've seen that when you try and do that in the past, it can turn into DNFs quite quickly. So maybe Lando hopping around in P2, P3 in the back doesn't all of a sudden gives him that massive like, oh look, the two guys just crashed in front of me and I just got to win. It could happen. I do think though that out of Oscar and Lando at the moment, it is very much Oscar's game. I just
5 races into the season, who are the title contenders in your view? Potential title contenders.
There's 4 of them, but one of them's going to need much more hopes than the other. It's Max, Oscar, and Lando for me. And I know a lot of people just count Lando out, but I'm sorry. Like Lando is he's a very quick driver. And all it's going to take is for him to just kind of click with that car, and Oscar is going to be under serious pressure, so, but, I can't diss Oscar because Oscar's also made a big jump on last year from where he was. So, it's no mean feat. But yeah, it's those 3 and George. But George, unfortunately, is at the behest of the car at the minute because the car is just not quick enough to be fighting for wins. And where George has been impressive is he's kind of maximizing it every weekend to where if Mercedes can just click something and just kind of get him to be able to fight for wins here and there, George could very much be in the title fight. And I think Leclerc, unfortunately, is just too far off because of, what's the name? Ferrari. That's
Yeah.
So I think it's those 4.
Yeah, I think for me, at least for now, I think there are 5. I'd include Leclerc in the picture. The reason is the gap between McLaren or Red Bull to probably, I think Mercedes was around 2 to 3 tenths in Saudi.
Mm-hmm.
An upgrade can solve that gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And a technical directive can also solve that gap.
The only problem with that is if the technical directive does hurt McLaren, it's probably going to hurt Ferrari as well.
They don't have that kind of flexing, right? They
dove in with it
Ferrari
head first.
They
were the two late. So Red Bull and Ferrari were the 2 late ones to it. It was Mercedes and McLaren that were first in on that game. So you should say reasonably it should hurt one of those two teams most, out of everyone. But when
It actually no, not even that. It entirely. And the reason why I say this is because it appears, and actually McLaren touched on it, where they said that Red Bull and Ferrari are the two teams compared to almost every other team on the grid that are running probably the stiffest wings of the entire grid, where the flex is almost negligible.
okay.
So it seems that maybe there is a scenario, or maybe there's an argument to be made that either Ferrari lobbied for something like this early in the year, or maybe Red Bull did. But
Mm-hmm.
what both of them have done is they've tried to pretty much optimize their package around the technical directive that will come into effect in Barcelona.
In race
So they've
9,
made
yeah,
their entire investment in optimizing the package
for that,
pretty much for the rest of the season.
yeah.
Whether that is the case or not is something, again, it'll become obvious maybe Barcelona and a few races after that. But the gap is so small.
I also just think like people pray for these things too much, and like time and time again in F1, the guys who are fastest generally are hurt the least by it, and I think everyone's praying like, or a lot of people are praying that like, oh, McLaren's going to be pegged back by it. But my thinking is the guys who can get the most out of a flexi wing at 15 millimeters are probably also the guys who can get the most out of a flexi wing at 10 millimeters.
Then
Yeah. Like, so it's kind of, it's like whenever they try and peg anyone back, like they tried to peg, maybe they didn't try, but
Red
like
Bull.
that's Mercedes tried to push for directives to hurt Red Bull, and it ended up hurting McLaren most incidentally, but Mercedes got hurt more than Red Bull did. So I don't know. I'm not sold on it yet. I think obviously we need to see, but yeah.
My point being that either an upgrade, either a technical directive, what it can
Close
do
enough.
is potentially it can just close the field. And while Ferrari is a bit behind, at least for now, in terms of pace and overall performance as well, and a lot of other things, if the car is, look, even last season they showed that the car development throughout the season was quite impressive. And if they're able to do that a bit this season by bringing the first upgrade in Imola, that is going to help them jump a bit, maybe close the gap to McLaren. And look, once it is within a tenth, right now it's around 3 tenths, roughly. That's the gap that they say. If it reaches a tenth, now that's where a driver like a Leclerc, potentially Lewis, if he finds form, they can make sorry they can make difference.
That was a nice way to put it.
I tried to keep a straight face on that. Yeah,
I was impressed.
Yeah, at least Leclerc can make a difference in that case. And once that happens, look, all that is needed is maybe a Ferrari or a Red Bull or a Mercedes to a certain extent have 2 to 3 strong races where either they're the fastest or they're very close to being the fastest and they win.
Yeah.
Once a driver racks up 3 consecutive wins, that's where things start to turn. And that's where that particular driver can come into the contention.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit too early to say that.
Oh, it's way too early.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just as it stands, I think Leclerc is out, but that could change very quickly.
Pretty early. And
Yeah.
okay, now talking about Lando, look, there are question marks. He has to show that he can bounce back because look, the spiral is mental more than the car or the skill. And these are the kind of spirals where I think he has to hope that it doesn't reach a point where the deficit is a bit too much. And then McLaren starts putting all the eggs in the Oscar basket. I think that's where he has to be very careful.
Yeah. I just really think that like at the moment for me it's just Lando is just making too many mistakes. It's like every weekend. And to be fair to Lando, a lot of those mistakes have been tiny, just very consequential is the problem. Because the field is so close now as well that he just can't afford any mistakes basically. Like things could change very quickly though. Like I do find it quite funny that fans just immediately say, oh, well, Lando's not world championship material. And it's like, oh, it's changed in 4 races. Like, calm down. Like all of a sudden it's like Oscar is clearly better. It's like, look, 4 races ago, Lando was dominating Oscar. Like, it can swing back and forth very quickly, as you said. Just I do agree that I agree with myself at the moment that I think Lando's unfortunately just not doing enough, but that
Yeah,
could change. Let's see.
of
But
course. Yeah.
Oscar, I do like that either way, even if Lando doesn't bounce back, I do like the fact that it's not going to be like all of a sudden like an easy championship for Verstappen because Oscar is right there. And out of all of the drivers outside of maybe a Leclerc or perhaps a Russell, Oscar is the only other one that I have confidence in that like if we go into a corner, Oscar's not giving that corner. Like it's just not
Yeah.
happening. And
Yeah.
that's going to make some fireworks. Like Oscar's move on Leclerc last year in Baku, like we're
His move
going
on
to see him.
Lewis just in Jeddah,
Yeah. Yeah.
stunning.
Like Verstappen's not going to have a thing where I'll just force my car in and you know, he's not going to be able to do anything. Because
Yeah.
unlike, I think, Lando, who maybe after like Austria last year would give a bit of room and prefer to kind of survive, Oscar will not be that driver. It's like, no, we'll crash. That's no problem. Like, you know,
Yeah.
let's go. You
Yeah.
know,
It'll be
so
fun. I think we'll see a lot of shades of Oscar as well this season. There are going to be a lot of things where actually he will maybe the emotions will come out. He knows the stakes are high now, right?
yeah,
But the one thing that I've actually liked about Oscar is how every milestone and every step he's just taken it in his stride.
yeah,
First
yeah,
podium, yeah, sure. First pole, yeah, fine. First win,
yeah,
okay. Leading the championship, fine. There was at no point has he sounded like, wow, it's a surprise or I shouldn't be here. Nothing like
yeah,
that. It's
yeah,
entirely, yeah, this was always supposed to happen.
yeah, yeah,
And that's the winner's mentality that I think he has. And I think that's where he probably will have the edge because he's done the dogfighting in the past.
yeah,
Lando has not done the dogfighting because I think I've touched on it a bit in the past as well, where Lando just romped through the entire field when he was first when he first came into the picture. He dominated karting. When he started car racing, he dominated almost every field until he reached Formula 2, where basically he
yeah,
was a child fighting with aged men. He was,
yeah.
I think, 5 or 6
This
years
is the
younger.
thing. Everyone talks like they're like, oh well, Oscar proved all this in his career. I think people have just forgotten that Lando had a really incredible like junior career as well. Like when you look at his
Lando made it to
F2,
Formula 1 as a teenager, as an
yeah,
18-year-old.
and
Oscar made it at
in
22.
the thing people will I've seen people bring up is oh he didn't win F2 or whatever. It's like but his competition was like very like
Russell.
superior competition. It was Russell and Albon. Like
Yeah.
that's who he was fighting with. He beat Albon and he lost to Russell after a couple of retirements and stuff as well. But it would have been very close otherwise. Whereas like Oscar did have competition, but like to put this in perspective, Oscar's F2 championship was against Schwartzman. Like so these are very different level of drivers that you're fighting here. So
Yeah.
I don't want to degrade Oscar at all because his junior career was spectacular. But the point is, you can't like throw this whole thing of just go, oh well, you know, he won F2, and it's like, yeah, but the competition level is quite different here, you know. Like, so let's like it just irks me in F1. I talk about this all the time that people have this weird idea that to praise one driver you have to bash another, and you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you can argue who's better, but you don't have to go, well, Lando has to be shit for Oscar to be good. It's like, like when I saw Box do that on Twitter, it's like, well, Lando's a midfield driver at best. And I'm like, well, that makes your driver look pretty shit then, because that midfield driver has been pushing your driver to the absolute limit since they joined. And that like midfield driver at best has been doing just as good as Oscar in most cases. Like
If
this
not
is
better.
the first. Yeah, and this is the first, like, you know, it's these 5 races. Even in these 5 races, it's not like that midfield driver has been like miles off of Oscar either. You know, so it's like, it's just an odd conversation in my head. I'm like, why would you do, you're just ruining
Yeah.
your argument.
I mean, just appreciate the way the people are. I think the
Like
problem is just
at least the Hamilton fans do the opposite, right? They talk about how good the other drivers are because that
Only
makes
when-
their driver look better. Yeah.
yeah, at least they're smart that way.
Yeah. It's
I
some
mean,
thinking.
by the way, it only happens after after Lewis has moved on to the next teammate. So last year, Russell was shit. As soon as Lewis left, Russell is elite. And
Yeah.
apparently Bottas is also the next coming of Senna.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways,
Christ.
by the way, early prediction. If you have to make a prediction, how do you think that? I'm not going to ask you to make a pick. how do you think the championship pans out in terms of in the next 19 races? How do you think it ebbs and flows?
I do think like it's going to be between Oscar, Lando, and Verstappen in reality. As it stands, I would say it's going to be an Oscar Verstappen title. But as I've already said, like the thing that like Oscar fans, for example, or like Verstappen fans need to be careful of is like Lando's not a million miles off Oscar, and all it will take is to click. And I still think, from everything I've seen, I still think that Oscar is a better racing driver at his peak, but I think that Lando is a better qualifier at his peak. And given how close everything is, if Lando gets back onto like his top qualifying form,
Yeah.
with the way the dirty air is and with the way these cars are and with how close they are, if Lando started doing what he did last year and just out qualifying and getting pole position, it doesn't matter how good Oscar's racecraft is, that could win a championship. So this can change real quick, like really quick. So
Lando put on 20 seconds or something on Oscar last season. And you do not make that gap up in a
put
in a
20
winter.
seconds on Max, like, you know, and then like in those were races where like Lando's winning by 20 seconds and Oscar's in fourth. Like that could very quickly happen with how this season is. So yeah,
Exactly.
Look, as it stands, Oscar is in better form than Lando. Like it's just obvious, like at the moment. But I think in terms of peak ability, Oscar is definitely a better racer in terms of wheel to wheel, I think. And I think a lot of that comes down to he's just, as you said, he's just calm, he's confident, like he's willing to kind of play those games with Max. Clearly knows the rules better than Max if we look at Saudi Arabia, which is not, as I said, not a small feat because Max plays the rules. But yeah, at the moment for me, I think it looks like it's going to be an Oscar versus Verstappen championship because Lando just doesn't look 100% at ease with that car at the minute. And when you've got such a title fight, like such a close fight, Lando needs to be at ease with that car. Like that's just going to be a nightmare. So, but let's see.
I think the season is going to be defined by, you can say, stretch of races. Now, what we've had is a 5-race stretch where arguably Oscar has been the more,
Class of the field at the minute, yeah.
I won't say the class of the it's
Oh,
in
I
terms
will.
of
Just class of the field. Oscar is the best driver on the grid at the moment.
in terms of being better. I think Oscar has been better than Lando. I think there are going to be phases where Lando nails it, and then he picks up 3 to 4 races where he's ahead, and then you have Oscar doing that. It's I'm still not sure if Red Bull can close the gap. Helmut Marko is claiming. By the way, just to put it out there, if Red Bull is able to close the gap, I think Max walks the title. I'm not even kidding. If Red Bull is like it, if we've reached a scenario where Red Bull is within a tenth of McLaren, I think Max wins the title very, very easily.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
because I think in that position, you've easily got like a Raikkonen situation 2007 once again, where like as much as Raikkonen did a great job, like you can say a large part of his winning is the fact that McLaren had two drivers taking points off one another. So you'd have exactly the same situation where there's a swing
McLaren
back and
didn't
forth.
know you had to pit for slicks.
Yeah, with that as well. Yeah. And they screwed over Alonso, which you just don't do. I mean, we should know this.
Bad juju.
Yeah. Bad Ron Dennis. But yeah. So it's an exciting title though, because I think we don't know yet.
I think the thing is there are so many ebbs and flows that are going to happen. You don't know. Look, if somehow Ferrari clicks and Leclerc just goes on a run, maybe one can
odds are stacked against it. Like, you know,
maybe Mercedes. But by the way, Mercedes is probably the team in terms of upgrades which can gain a lot because that car is silky smooth in terms of whenever you look at the onboards, McLaren is on the edge. Red Bull is all over the place. Ferrari is a handful, and Mercedes is like, are you even pushing this car or not?
You know where Mercedes, I think, have an advantage as well, because they're at that point, right? And they're not that far off in terms of performance. They could push a little bit more towards performance because, like, Russell can handle a tricky car. Like, he's done it for his entire career. So
Yeah.
if they're like, look, we can add a couple of tenths, but the rear end's going to fucking kick out quite a bit. Russell's like, give me it. I'll do it.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
Like, so might make things tricky for Antonelli. Probably not. He's a good driver, but I'm just saying, rookie season. But if they want the title this year, that could be the kind of like,
precisely.
right. Yeah.
And
Cool.
okay, gun to the head, one prediction. Who wins the title?
Russell.
Yeah, Max.
Yeah.
I'm still going with Max.
If it was an actual gun to my head and like my life depended on it, I'm picking Max. But
This is hypothetical, right?
I think though I do still think Russell's in with a good shot of it though. Like
Of course.
Yeah.
I think it will. What it's going to come down to is who brings the upgrade and when, and how much of a performance differential they can create. Because if it's enough, Russell can win. I have no doubts he can win races consecutively, and he is a bit of a headstrong guy that he'll probably marshal the troops much better than maybe a few other.
Here's a question for you, which is going to piss off both Lando and Oscar fans. But
Yeah.
if George is in that McLaren right now, do you think he's like, just no matter which one of those is his teammates, he's destroying them?
I wouldn't say destroying them. I think he'll make lesser mistakes than Lando.
Yeah. Do you think he's
And
beating Oscar?
once- Yeah.
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 And the reason I do
terms
too
of
is
pace,
because
Yeah. Go for it.
yeah, I was just gonna say, what I was saying earlier about like Oscar being stronger in like race performance and Lando being stronger in qualifying. I think George is better than both of them in both of those things. Like I think George is a better qualifier than Lando, and I think Lando's a brilliant qualifier, but I think George is better. And I think that Oscar, in terms of race performance, doesn't give an inch, just like Oscar. And I actually think he's more aggressive than Oscar is in the right situation. So I think he has both of those things covered. And this is
And he's more experienced as well, right? He's
Yeah.
been doing it for a while.
Gary Anderson on a technical podcast actually turned around and said, finally, George is getting some recognition this year, and I don't understand why it took so long. And he said the exact same thing you and I have been saying, which is like, why is this guy getting so underrated all the time? Like,
Yeah.
he's clearly brilliant,
Lewis left. Honestly, that's the thing. Lewis left. Mercedes is, by the way, it has had its best start in the ground effect era. It's not a surprise.
Yeah. Because they got
The-
rid
the
of the
team-
dead weight, is what you're saying. That's terrible. Hamilton fans, I hope you don't take this to heart. I personally would
I thought you were
never
talking
insult
about Mike
Hamilton.
Elliott.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, you think Lewis was a deadweight? I was not thinking on that lines at all. Yeah.
I didn't say
Anyways,
that.
I think Max wins the title. Probably. I still think that, look, crunch moments and everything, I think Max has the edge. I would
The-
really, yeah, go for it.
I was just gonna say the Red Bull is not the fourth fastest car, as everyone keeps saying. It's the second fastest car. It is the fourth fastest. I think it will be at certain tracks, but it seems like there's going to be maybe. It seems like there's going to be less of those tracks than tracks where it's second fastest. So Max in the second fastest car, and by the way, not like a second fastest like fucking, the difference between Mercedes and Red Bull in years past, like a close second fastest. To the point where the race actually said it was the fastest car in Suzuka, which I'm sure people loved hearing because Max lost the race.
You mean Jeddah,
Jeddah, sorry. What did I say?
Suzuka.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I meant Jeddah.
In Jeddah, I think it could have been. Yeah, I think I would not disagree because Max.
I think it
closed
was
the gap on
close
Oscar.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Max, the start from Max fucked it up. That was probably also why he was pissed. That's the only reason.
Well, he actually said, I think, since that he's like, they did the kind of math on it, and he's like, yeah, I would have won without the penalty.
Yeah.
Like he's said that.
right.
So yeah, probably yeah.
Anyways,
Let's
moving on
move
from
swiftly
this.
on.
By the way, since we all know that the racing is dead these days in Formula One, FIA is, again, by the way, John Noble, shout out, great journalist, probably one of the better ones in Formula One, alongside Mark Hughes, who apparently gets shit on from Lewis Hamilton fans these days, which is so weird.
You saying Hamilton fans would bash people for takes there? That sounds very unlikely.
So Mark Hughes did a post, did an entire article dissecting Lewis Hamilton's struggles, and on the entire article, if you look at the post he put on X, it's basically a journalist's nightmare. What it had Verstappen fans coming in and saying he's washed, and Mark saying you're talking rubbish, he's not washed because he's shown decent peaks in when conditions are right. And then you have Lewis Hamilton fans saying you've always been racist against Lewis. And I felt for him because there's no way, there's no winning for him when he's doing something. And he
Yeah.
did a brilliant analysis on where things are right and where things are wrong. And what he got was just
Sounds pretty
absolute
racist.
lunatics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
You
Anyways,
can't do analyses like that anymore. That's very racist. That's
exactly.
obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, fine. So the FIA is reportedly there are three options that it is trying to do to actually boost racing to a certain extent. By the way, spoiler alert: 2026 racing is going to suck, just like it does this season,
Yeah.
probably worse. So
Probably
yeah.
a team is going to have like a 3-second advantage, which could be bigger than 2014.
yeah,
Which is why
Probably
Russell is
Saudi.
clinging on to that Mercedes. Like next year.
yeah. Okay, so the three steps, not three steps, I think three options that they have. The first option is something that they applied in Jeddah, where they went a step softer than last season. And as you can see, it worked miraculously. It didn't, because nothing changed. Racing was
Yeah.
still as poor as it could be. Next thing that they are trying to do is they will probably try to introduce compounds where there's a step between the compound. So what we have right now is C1 to C6, where 6
And
is
they
the
pick-
softest, 1 is the
Yeah.
the hardest.
Yeah.
They brought, I think, C3, C4, C5 this time around in Jeddah. What they are thinking is they'll bring
C1,
something.
C3, C5, something like that. With a step in between.
So it's basically C3, C4, and C1.
Yeah. So you've got
Yeah.
a really hard compound and then two softer ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So what they are
Yeah.
trying to do is they will, since it's too hard, it makes it the pace advantage goes. What is going on these days is, yeah, you're running a medium hard stint. That's it. You're not really, there's no such there's no variable in terms of strategies. So what they're trying to do is they'll insert another option where either you'll have to run two mediums and a soft, or a medium and super hard, or whatever you want to call it. But the hard is going to be a pain in the ass. So
But
that is
it'll
what,
last for ages, so they could decide to.
but it will suck ass as well. Remember in Bahrain, Max went on the hard tire and it did nothing.
Yeah,
It was absolutely just a useless tire. So that is something that they are trying. And by the way, there's a third one which has actually met with a bit of, you can say, a bit of a negative publicity for the FIA, like they don't have enough already. They're trying to increase the pit lane speed limit from 80 to 100. So what that does is it decreases the pit lane, the time in the pit lane. And once that is decreased, it increases the probability of a team going from a
For a two-stop,
one-stopper to a two-stopper.
because you lose less time. Yeah.
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 Do you think any of these is actually going to be successful?
No. Ironically, I've said it for a while. I think it's just annoying that we're getting rid of these regulations in 2026 for something arguably worse, when the real obvious solution that I think Gary Anderson talked about as well in the technical podcast, where he's like, they've basically in these rules now for next year. I can't do his accent, but Scottish. Yeah, he said the same thing I've been saying for a
80
while,
years
which
of
is
age, apparently. He's
Yeah.
very, very old.
yeah.
So-
But he's also he's brilliant as well. But yeah, he talked about something I was saying, which was like, this was the perfect opportunity to where, okay, 2022, clearly if you get rid of the dirty air, the racing works. 23, 24, 25, fine, it fucks up. but you get all of this learning of like, okay, this is where the teams develop. So now we can put in stricter rules for 2026 to basically allow the engineers some freedom, but really tighten up the regulation in terms of the dirty air. And therefore you get great racing next year. Instead, they've gone, no, we just need to get rid of all that to make some manufacturers happy and just fuck the rules completely. So we're going to get even worse racing last year. I think that is the only solution, is like to actually just restrict dirty air, because like if it was a one-stop strategy, but we had cars that were this close, like as they are right now, and they could actually fucking overtake, the strategy wouldn't be a problem anymore. Like, because they could fight on track, you know?
Saudi Arabia 2022.
Yeah.
Watch that race.
Because you don't need to
That's
worry.
what Formula One is
That was a
supposed to be.
one-stop, right? As far as I remember.
Yeah.
One-stop
Yeah,
race.
even that
And
was
yet-
behind a safety car. So
Yeah.
basically, there was no position. I mean, there were a couple of positions that changed, but that's not what decided the race.
But there was racing on track, like,
Yeah.
you know, and it kept racing back and forth. And like, if we had cars right now that was like a tenth or two between them, as we have at the minute, where the drivers can make the difference. Like, imagine in Saudi Arabia, for example, if dirty air wasn't a problem, Max would have been fighting Oscar properly. They would have been fighting back and forth throughout the whole race. And therefore the stops, like the tire changes don't matter. We don't care anymore, because it's like, oh, look, they're overtaking back and forth. I don't care if it's a one stop or a two stop. So the solution they're going towards is, okay, well, the racing on track is shite. It's going to get worse. So why don't we make it so strategy is the only way they can overtake? And it's like, well, great, but
You know,
the
there are
obvious,
two ways
you
to
know.
make overtaking happen. First is brilliant tires and low turbulence, basically.
Mhm.
That is what we had in 2022, at least early 2022.
Yeah.
And what we are actually going to try and experiment with this season is fragile tires and ridiculous levels of turbulence. And while that brings overtaking, that's not pure racing, is it?
No, because what
That's-
you're trying to basically do is just go like, okay, well, look, they can't overtake properly. So let's make a really big offset between the two drivers, which will make overtaking happen, but not the kind of overtaking you want. Basically, what you're doing is like, for example, it's like Oscar and Max are fighting. So instead of a situation where the two of them can like keep fighting each other, it's a situation where, oh, Max's tires have gone off, so now Oscar can pass. But it's like, that's not
we
really
don't want that,
overtaking.
right? Yeah.
That's literally just going, okay, so Max has now gone off a cliff, so Oscar can easily take him. Like, that's basically what you're doing is going, let's make strategy.
2011. Yeah, we're basically going back to 2011 because I'll never understand for an complete entity that is worth what, $1 billion now.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of work that FOM and FIA does with the sport and the quality of racing, it's poor.
The thing is, what I don't really understand is like the symbiosis between the two, because like the FIA gets a cut of that money, right? But
Yeah.
like it's FOM that really suffers when the racing's bad, right? They're the ones that like inevitably they suffer more than the FIA do, because the FIA get a small cut of that big pie. It's FOM and the teams that get like 80% of that money, basically. Possible. I think it's actually more. I think it's like 90% of the fund. You know, they get a lot of it. The FIA get their small amount, and the FIA is a non-profit, so technically they have to write off a lot of it as well, right? So like the whole point here is that why are FOM not going, okay, we need to sit down with the FIA and fix these fucking rules? But they just seem to be like, no, let the FIA do it. And I think it's just down to profit. We don't care. Like, and what'll happen is it'll only be when there's a recession or something goes wrong, people stop watching because they've got other shit to worry about. And all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, we better fix racing now. It's like, it's too late, guys.
And you know, that's the problem with FOM right now. What have they done in the last few years, ever since there is actually a boom in terms of numbers? What have they done? They've cashed out.
Nothing. They just sit back and
They've cashed out
Yep.
in every way possible. The ticket prices, they're through the roof. Then you have a lot of these, I think in UK at least, and maybe in other countries, F1 has turned into pay-per-views.
Mhm.
That's not how you actually help propagate the sport. that's basically you minting money until you can't.
This is the problem with it just being completely run, like basically entirely run by just a publicly traded company, because a publicly traded company just cares about quarterly profits. They don't care about long-term strategy. They do care about long-term strategy, but only when it starts affecting their quarters, basically.
Yeah.
That's
And
it.
remember, that was the whole thing. I think in 2017 or 2018, that was the first time when the committee was formed to help improve racing.
Mm-hmm.
And the result was the 2022 regulations. And the regulations were put in place by Ross Brawn and Pat Simmons to a certain extent. What has happened since then? Neither Ross Brawn nor Pat Simmons are there.
No.
And what has happened as a result? 23, 24, and so on, the racing has continued to regress. Why? Because if those guys were in place, they know this doesn't help.
What's happened is, without those guys as well, the teams have just been able to just lobby for what they want to suit them, which doesn't benefit racing. It just suits their particular team. So, like, Mercedes get all of the Mercedes suppliers on hand and say, look, we want this change for this particular thing, which helps their performance relative to, say, Red Bull, but doesn't help the racing, so, because it adds dirty air. What they were talking about in the race technical podcast, Gary Anderson, I think, brought it up again, which was like, maybe it's time, or maybe it was Ed Straw. Is it potentially time to say, let's do what I think it is WEC does with prototype development, which is like
DOP? Balance of performance?
No. A different one where you basically start to measure the dirty air itself. And what you do is you have a limit to the amount of like wake, or whatever way they kind of measure it, to say like, okay, you can develop like, and that also gives the engineers more technical freedom to develop faster cars in different ways. Because what you're saying is, we're just going to measure your car in terms of the amount of dirty air it gives off. So you have a lot more freedom in terms of like looking for pace, but you can't do it at the expense of the car behind, essentially. So I think that might be a better way to go, which is like, look, we just start measuring dirty air and clamping down.
Yeah.
Because otherwise what's going to happen is like, the guys don't care about dirty air. That's not a metric they take into account. So they're just looking for the most effective thing they can do within the regulations. So
and win.
And the FIA is always going to be playing a silly game of trying to kind of close off areas of dirty air, which they're never going to win against like a team of 1,000 engineers building a car. Yeah. So the better thing to do is just go, okay, look, you can only give off 12% dirty air. Oh, well, that's impossible. No, you're F1 engineers. You'll figure it out. So go and figure it out. Like, this is the maximum dirty air you can give off in whatever metric. Figure it out. And if your car is slow because of that, that's a you problem. Figure it out. Like, this is what we're doing. And they'll figure it out. They will.
And exactly. And what's going to happen next season, on the contrary, we have basically a scenario where you'll have active aerodynamics. And what's one thing that active aerodynamics does best? Cause turbulence.
Air. Yeah.
And it will screw the car that is actually chasing him. So
I think that's the only solution, is just to put the onus on the teams, who will figure this problem out. That as soon as I heard that suggestion, it may have been Ed Straw who said it, and he said, look, they do this in WEC now for some of the prototype cars. They give them basically develop whatever you want, but you have a maximum turbulent wake. There's basically some way they can measure it. I'm not an engineer, as you can imagine. And that seems like the smartest thing to me. Say to the teams, look, this is the amount you can do. We will be testing it on the weekends by putting some sort of device on the back of your car for testing, or whatever.
Ideally, what tends to happen is the 12% that you're saying is 12% is the loss of downforce when you're following a car. So basically, if you're producing 100, if you're following a car, it will be
you just put sensors on the front wing of the cars, right? So they can track the dirty air coming off the car in front. So then if Lando's like behind a car, Ferrari, and that's producing like 30% turbulent air, whatever way you measure it, it's like, okay, well, you're disqualified now, producing unfair racing.
Exactly.
And the teams would fix it very quickly if that happened.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think that's the only way to go.
I think the priorities have changed. I think the problem that happens with FOM is it picks a thing, it goes in that direction, and what happens is you might end up succeeding in that particular direction, but you end up screwing the other areas, and that is what is hurting the sport.
2026 seems to be just the absolute, the shit show in terms of like the height of compromise, where they just tried to make one single manufacturer happy, and they compromised everything else. That's what it looks like from the outside. And they've only got themselves to blame for that. Like, they can't blame. The thing is, FOM can't even blame the FIA for this one, because the FIA basically had their hands tied behind their backs, because they were like, we have to have this engine format, now make everything else work with it. And this is the only. This is one of the very few times.
By the way, there are still no clarifications.
This is one of the very few times where I feel sorry for the FIA, and that doesn't happen very often. But in this case, I do feel sorry for them, because they were stuck.
I mean, look, the expectations are so low that maybe we might see something good. That's the only way I can actually, look at it in any kind of positive manner, because it looks bad. And why it looks bad is because it seems that Mercedes might have stolen the march. And while there's a positive that McLaren and Mercedes, both of them will be strong in that case, I just worry if that is maybe not the case, because usually works teams in a engine dominated settings, it tends to dominate. So yeah,
like, that shouldn't be the case given the restrictions now compared to before, but it could still be very much.
Exactly. Good.
I think, look, no matter how the regulations go, if Hülkenberg or Alonso gets a title, it's a success in my books. I think we can agree on that, right?
We'll open a pint here if Hülkenberg wins.
Keep these regulations forever.
Yeah.
But they're winning by 3 seconds on every race. Yeah, it'd be like they're winning by 3 seconds a lap, and I'm like, yeah, but it's Hulkenberg winning, so I don't care. It's fine.
Of course, he deserves it.
This dominance should last forever. Yeah.
But it would be a great story for Audi, for Hülkenberg, for Binotto as well, which is precisely why it's not going to happen, because it's Binotto.
No.
That's the whole problem.
Yeah.
If it was someone else, I would have been still hopeful, but it's Binotto, and you
speaking
don't trust
of those teams as well. Someone talked about is Alonso considering giving up? So I think it was a comment maybe on one of my videos, like, Alonso's going to retire by the end of the season. I'm like, you do not know Alonso. Do you think he's going to retire just before potentially having like an Adrian Newey car with a Honda engine? Like, he's not retiring. Like, are you insane?
He's not going anywhere. Yeah.
No. If he retires, we'll quit this podcast. So it's not happening.
I agree. If he retires, the podcast is done.
Yeah.
Because look, what's the point of it in that case?
Yeah.
Because in that case, look, Alonso stays and Alonso leaves and Stroll remains. What the fuck are we even doing afterwards? So yeah.
Oh God. If Stroll wins a championship, I'm done. I'm finished. Can't. I'm over.
Yeah. Even I agree. I'm back. I'll go back.
Although it's impossible because they could literally put a bag of sand in the other car and it would beat Stroll, so it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Moving on.
What's next?
Now the more interesting bit.
We're going to talk about
debate.
Max again.
Yes. Okay. So my argument is, I think Max should stay at Red Bull for 2026 and beyond. As in the move to a Mercedes or an Aston Martin, I don't think it makes any sense. And now I'll explain why, and I'll see what your counter argument is in that case. Okay, so first of all, I don't think he's making a move for 2026 either ways. It would be a bit of a surprise if he does, but even if he does, the problem is it's going to be a gamble, and he will be stuck with that particular team for the entire duration of these regulations. So let's assume let's assume he goes to Mercedes, and Mercedes fucks up the regulations. Fucks up in the sense
Mercedes would never fuck up a regular. Oh, never mind. Yeah, go on, continue.
Yeah. In case it does, what we have is a scenario where Mercedes does not have the fastest car, and Max is stuck there for multiple seasons. And what we also know is Mercedes is not a team that is famous for building strong, aerodynamically efficient cars. That's not their forte. Their forte has been power units. In case the power unit is not up to the mark, that is gone. The entire regulation is done and dusted, over. If he goes to Aston Martin, it's the same thing. He goes to Aston Martin, it's not the best, it's not a proven product, and it doesn't succeed. On the other hand, Mercedes has a George Russell in the team and a Kimi Antonelli. They don't want to fuck with Max in that case. In that case, he's stuck with that particular scenario where he has to stick with a team Where of course there's Adrian Newey, there's Jonathan V. Who else is there?
Adrian Newey, at the moment Dan Fallows, but I think he's leaving completely. You've got Enrico
Yeah,
Cardile coming across. Andy Cowell, obviously, big engine
Andy
guy
Cole.
from before.
Yeah,
Yeah, huge like super team of
exactly.
people, basically.
A
Yeah.
strong team, but the it's not a proven pedigree. Pedigree is there, but it's
Plus,
not a proven combination.
he wouldn't get preferential treatment over his teammate because Lance Stroll would have to be allowed to beat him.
Yeah, I mean that's the tough
I
call.
hadn't thought about this before, but actually, I wonder would that be an issue because I know, like, obviously Max would destroy Lance Stroll, right? And they don't
Who
seem.
knows?
It does seem like Lance Stroll is in, or Lawrence Stroll doesn't mind his son being dominated, because he keeps putting like high end people beside him. But I wonder would that ever come to a situation where, like, if Lance was ahead, it's like, are they calling team orders because it's like the boss's son, and then you've got Yoss in the background complaining as well? Like, that sounds like a fucking nightmare.
I mean, Yoss is known to have a short temper, so
Really?
surprising, isn't it?
Hmm.
Regardless,
Let
in
me walk
case,
to the petrol station and think about that. Sorry, what were you
yeah,
saying? Yeah, go on.
yeah, in case if this happens, if he's stuck with Aston Martin and on the other hand you have Mercedes which is winning, the entire regulation once again is gone. So
Mm-hmm.
making a gamble for 2026, I think it's out of the picture.
Pointless.
Then you move, yeah, then you move to 2026. And again, there is one slight similarity. Suppose he's at Red Bull and the car sucks, the team sucks. Let's assume that is the case. On one side, you have Aston Martin, which again, pedigree there, proven, not. Mercedes, in case it is successful, then that Mercedes dream is gone. Either ways,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Mercedes dream is probably a bit of a long shot at this stage with the kind of comments that
It's
Toto has
gamble
made.
now or nothing, basically, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in 2026, if Max has to make a call between teams that would eventually reach a point of success, and he has to take a call between Red Bull, which is led by Christian Horner, or Aston Martin, which is first of all headed by Lawrence Stroll, who's known for his patience, and Newey and other people. I think it makes sense to stick with Red Bull in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I have to make a choice on which team is going to end the dominance of whichever team comes out on top, I think I'll pick Red Bull.
Yeah. I think, like, here's the thing. I think moving for 2026, as you said, I've said this a few times. I agree. It's like it's a complete gamble, and it could go really well or it could go really wrong. But, you know, why take that risk when you could take that risk in 26? The devil's advocate position on that is it depends on which team dominates in 26 that causes a headache for him, basically. Like, if he sticks with Red Bull in 2026 and it is Aston Martin that have the dominant car, then I think Aston Martin, like, if they have the dominant car and Alonso wins another championship, which would be beautiful, by the way, then I think that's a situation where Max could easily just go to that team, because I think Alonso's at the point where Alonso kind of, cool, got the third championship. Maybe
He's
sticks
not good.
around, but maybe not. But I think they could look at, like, kind of the long term and go, right, well, Max makes sense or whatever. Or hopefully at that point, Lance Stroll has realised that he's fucking useless, pisses off and opens up the other seat anyway and goes and wins a WEC championship or something else. Aston Martin he could move to. The only problem, and why I'm saying this, is with this whole idea, which both of us kind of agree on, which is wait until 2026 and see where everything shakes out, stick with Red Bull for now. Only problem with that is if Mercedes are dominant and you are Mercedes, if George Russell wins the title in 2026, right, in a dominant Mercedes, and Antonelli is kind of fighting to the point where Antonelli is kind of up there and you could see the progress, why would you sign Max in that position? Like, as Mercedes, that's a pointless signing. You're paying more money to get the same outcome, essentially, you know, and just causing yourself problems, because if Max goes in, unlike George, he's under no circumstances going to play nice with Antonelli. He's got no reason to. And again, Jos Verstappen has no reason to play nice with Antonelli, whereas George, because he's the Mercedes guy and Mercedes brought him up and gave him that position, has more incentive to kind of play nice with Antonelli. So, yeah, it really depends. I think, like, the only gamble that makes sense for Max is to try a Mercedes, but that could backfire just as easily as it could work. So yeah, I think he should stay, and like the upside
Beyond
is
2026. What do you think he should do? That's because look, what I've seen is I've seen almost everyone pretty much writing the eulogy for the Max Red Bull partnership. I think it's fair if people are doing that, but I also think if Max is not in a dominant car in 2026, I don't think he's in a dominant car for the entire duration of that regulation,
yeah,
because that's just how things work in Formula One. You don't
yeah,
catch
yeah.
up. You just don't.
Because like, I mean, easily we could have seen a situation where like in 2014 Mercedes, for example, right? They had a dominant car and like it was Rosberg and Hamilton fighting one another, right?
Yeah.
At that point, with the difference that they had, if they wanted to, like, people will laugh at this, but like, remember Vettel at that time was very highly rated. Like, he had just come off 4 championships, dominant championship in 2013. He was at this kind of peak that Verstappen had. You know, he, like, everyone looked at him that way. Mercedes didn't all of a sudden go, right, we will pay anything to get, you know, Vettel into the car, because it's like, right, we have 2 good drivers. So there is that risk of like, why would Mercedes need them if they're dominant?
Actually, Mercedes reached out in 2015.
Because of Rosberg and the fight, I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
Did Vettel turn that down? I don't remember that.
Ferrari dream. Fucking idiot.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. God, Seb, I love you, but you're such a moron. Yeah. So
I've said that a lot about
maybe I'm
these
wrong.
things.
Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong then. Like, maybe they do hire Max regardless, but it just seems like
I don't think so.
it's an odd one because they have 2 brilliant drivers in there, you know. That
And
are,
Antonelli is only going to get better, and
Yeah.
where he is already, he's not too far
this is the
behind
worst
George.
Antonelli will ever be, basically. Think of it
Exactly.
that way. You know,
And at
so-
his worst, he's ahead of Lewis Hamilton in the championship after 5 races.
Well, that's not hard, but yeah. So
Oh God.
I
Yeah.
called Hamilton washed during the thing, and it was like the whole. I didn't actually call him washed. I basically just said like what
Implied.
we talked about before was that like he's unwilling or unable to get into these. This is the next topic, isn't it? So we should probably
Yeah.
should we
Wait.
just end this debate so we can move on with the Hamilton washed conversation?
Bashing. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, just to wrap it up, 2026, do you think he sticks with Red Bull, or do you think he should move? 'Cause
I think Max, if Red Bull don't perform in 2026, I think he is jumping out of that seat no matter what, because I think Max is in a very Senna-esque position in some ways, which is that Max seems to only really care about winning, and he's loyal to the team in the process. But I think this is a fair thought in Max's head, which is, well, I've already won 4 championships with Red Bull now, so we've achieved what we set out to achieve. So I no longer owe them like sitting around now and waiting for them to come back. So I think Max could, because he doesn't care about money as much, and because other teams would pay him, could afford to do the whole thing of, no, I'll come to you on a 1-year contract and prove what I can fucking do. You know, let me over there. I'll get paid less, all of these different things. I think he jumps
will he go?
if they don't perform. Whoever the fucking fastest team is, that's where he's going to try to go anyway.
I don't think Mercedes signs him. In
No,
2026,
this is the
Mercedes
problem.
has the fastest.
Yeah, this is
that's
the
what I'm saying.
problem. Yeah.
Exactly.
But if
And
they
that's where the
don't, then he
deadlock
goes to
is.
the second best team.
That's what Vettel did, and that's where he kind of got screwed, right?
Sure, yeah. I'm not saying it's going to work out, but that's what
Exactly
it's going
my
to do.
point.
This is the problem with Formula One, though, right? Is like your legacy gets, and we'll talk about this again with Hamilton, I guess, next. But like your legacy gets written because when people have I've called this out the last few weeks. I think I put like a diagram thing up of how F1 fans misunderstand things, which is like,
Yeah.
when my driver is winning, it's all on the driver, and when my driver is losing, it's all on the car. And when your enemy driver, say Lando, for example, for Max fans, when Lando's winning, it's all the car, and when Lando's losing, it's all Lando. And this is how people just think about things for ages. So when Vettel was winning, it was just, Vettel's a merchant, a car merchant, all these things. And because he didn't have success in Ferrari, it was all the car, not taking anything into account that maybe it was to do with Ferrari being shit, you know, like, so this is going to be the same cycle with Verstappen. Unless Verstappen makes exactly the right call, jumps to Mercedes, for example, jumps to Mercedes right now for 2026, takes the gamble, and Mercedes do win, then everyone will go, oh, well, it was because Verstappen's just such a brilliant driver. You know, not taking into account that, no, it's because he went to the right team at the right time. Obviously you'll say, like, brilliant call, but they will just go, well, that team won because Verstappen was there. When the reality is that if Verstappen wasn't there, that team was still winning. Like, if Lewis had never gone to Mercedes, Rosberg would have won 3 titles easily in that 3 seasons, basically.
Hulkenberg would have won 3 titles.
Unless they put, maybe Hulk. But my point is, like, it's easy to make that call when forgetting it's 90% of the team. So, yeah, that's going to be the big challenge for Verstappen. And, like, I think Verstappen's
I'll put it like this. 2026, you have, assuming Mercedes is dominating, which team would you pick to end the dominance?
Probably Aston Martin, right? Like, I mean, just because of everything they're lining up. The problem with Red Bull is that, as much as I agree that, like, Red Bull is the team that I would have picked, they've now got so many variables that they need to fix, because it's no longer like, okay, we need to focus on the aero development and find an engine partner. They need to now fix the engine and get their aero development team back to where it was before. So those are 2 things they need to do. And when they were only doing one thing in the past, it took them a decade. Almost a decade, 8 years,
but
right?
They were hampered by the power unit thing, right?
Sure, yeah. But
that is precisely
they
why
had their aero team right. Now they don't have either of those things.
I won't say that. I think
their aero team is still very good.
They made a misstep.
It's not the best on the grid anymore, though, is my point. I think Red Bull's aero team for all of 2014 to 2021 was the best aero team. They were just fucked by the engine. Like, I think they always had a better aero team than Ferrari and Mercedes. Part of their downfall was that Newey just went, yeah, fuck this, we can't win, so who cares? And there was a couple of seasons where they didn't give up, but they just didn't try as much as they usually would.
He didn't try. He took a step back after 2014 for a long time.
So Dan Fallows and those guys built the team.
Yeah,
up,
it was basically Vache, Marshall, and Fallows who kind of handled the whole thing. It's the reason why I say this is because this is entirely based on, which is very weird that I'm taking his name. Peter Windsor actually came out and talked about on camera.
He's the guy that ran that hyper successful USF1 team, right?
Yeah. So successful that we don't even know about it. But he's right about some things. He said that, okay, look, next season there are going to be at least a couple of 3 new power unit that will be there. There'll be Honda, that is going to be brand new. There's going to be RBPT, which is Red Bull Powertrains, and then there's Audi. He said, out of all these 3, of course, for now, I'll pick Honda to be the best placed. But there's also this reality where what Red Bull has done is it always makes sure that all the bases are covered. So when the RBPT was formed, it wasn't formed just 2 years before 2026 regulations. They started work in 2022. Or 2021.
And they hired 220 people from
Mercedes.
Yeah.
And what happens is...
Which is not an insignificant number. Like, that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And he said the thing that Red Bull tends to do almost every time is they tend to focus on the basics and they wait for the results to come. And what they have done this time around as well is the entire basics in terms of having the timeline in place, checking off all the check boxes at the particular milestones, whatever it is, everything is done. And he said once a team is doing all these things correctly, of course they will have their stumbles, but this is a team you back to win.
There's one problem with this time though. Dietrich's dead. And the reason I say that's
in 2022, right?
Sure, but but they were winning in 2022. So the problem this time is when things went wrong last time.
Yeah.
You know, Horner, Newey, Marco, things went wrong. They went from winning to, Horner, Marco, and Newey were basically given, free reign by Dietrich to say, look, you guys know what you're doing. Go. I know this is going to be, God knows how many years project to get back to the top, but I trust you guys. Go and run with it. If they start losing this time, I don't see the Red Bull board giving Horner that much free rein. And that's my concern, is that if in 2026 Verstappen does fuck off, right? That the whole thing you're talking about is gone, in my opinion. Because if they lose Verstappen and they're not at the top, the board's going to get rid of Horner. And once you get rid of Horner, that's it. The whole thing just falls apart. And I don't think it's coming back after that either. Like, I just don't. Because
Look,
I don't
if Horner
know,
is gone, I think the whole thing collapses. The whole operation collapses.
I think if Verstappen goes and Horner stays, they can do what you said, which is come back.
That is what I'm saying.
I just don't trust the board to give Horner free rein this time. That's my problem.
I don't think they've. I think we've reached a point in Red Bull's
They don't have an option
journey.
basically.
No, that Horner is indispensable now. Apparently, they did the whole thing where I think last season they did. Probably I shared it earlier in the podcast as well, where each and every senior manager and personnel, they basically signed on a dotted line that said that if Horner is leaving or if he's being fired or pushed out, all of us are going.
Yeah.
And that's how Horner kind of saved his job.
Sure, yeah.
earlier.
And I think
yeah.
I think sure that's the case, but like boards are insane as well. They will do horribly stupid things.
True.
Like, you know, so I just don't, it's not like this is, I think that's the key problem for me, because I think if Dietrich was still there, it would be very much a look, give Horner, like Horner's the guy we need right now. Let's just keep him in. Like he's given us 2 runs of championships. If he'd done it twice, if he had only done it once and never again, that's one thing. But for him to have done it twice, well, he can do it a third time. Like he knows what the recipe is. So, you know, that was Mercedes as well. In like, I know it was a different situation because Toto owned quite a bit of the team. But if Mercedes had a dropped Toto, I would be saying the same thing. Like, no, you don't lose that guy. He's the gel that keeps this together, you know?
Exactly.
So everyone right now is, oh, well, you know, Horner should go and Verstappen should say. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you can replace a driver. You can't replace that guy. Like, you know, that is the guy who's the reason for the success.
Exactly. He is the team. And
he sets the direction. You know,
exactly.
like, that is the guy.
And he's done it far too many times, right? Again,
the worst case for them as well is if Horner leaves, it's like Newey going. The worst part of Horner leaving isn't just Horner leaving. It's that Horner will be working with one of your competitors now, and he will be bringing as many people as he can over.
Yeah, you've seen that story, the Pied Piper or something?
Yeah.
That is what is going to happen. He's basically he'll just go and everyone is going to come with him.
Yeah, because even if the board come in and go, oh well, you're all under non-competes, it's like, okay, I'm under non-compete for 2 years. And Horner goes to another team, he's like, right, you guys are already suffering, so let's just wait 2 years and I can bring all of these fucking people over. Yeah. And we just start Red Bull 2.0, but under this new brand, like whatever it is, Cadillac. Even if it's fucking Cadillac, whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Horner for me is the biggest thing. Like, Verstappen leaving Red Bull for me is just like, that's inevitable. So it's kind of like
supposed to happen.
Vettel left, Verstappen will leave. Drivers come and go. It's you know, it's like when Ron Dennis left, we all kind of knew like this is going to be a while before McLaren come back, if they ever do. Because same, like look, Williams is only kind of coming back now. Yeah.
And just look at it. Just look at Williams, right? 97 was the last time when they won a title. And if you talked to anyone about Williams in 97 or 98 or even 2000, that Williams is not going to win another title for 3 decades.
Yeah.
No one is going to agree with that. No. Everyone will be shocked. But that's how quickly things change.
And also, it all comes down to the team principle as well, though. Because once the team principle starts to fall off, like, the whole direction needs to be reshaped again. And
exactly. Anyways, let's see what happens. Again,
speaking of other disasters. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Yeah. Just to wrap it up, if I had to make a prediction, even I would say that Max would be leaving in 2026. If I had to give a suggestion to Max, I'd say Red Bull is the team that would break the dominance of Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'll put it.
I say go to Ferrari.
I mean, I don't hate Max Verstappen, so I would never do that to him.
No, I just like that, you know. I just like that it gives more and more concrete evidence every time that a big name goes to Ferrari that Vettel wasn't washed and that it's just Ferrari's fault. So speaking of other disasters,
Michael Schumacher is the GOAT.
Yes.
So yeah,
So speaking of other disasters, should we talk about Hamilton?
Lewis Hamilton. Yeah. Let me set it up this way then. If
God.
Lewis Hamilton, the year is 2020, he wins the Turkish Grand Prix in the wet.
7th title. Yeah.
Yeah, seals his 7th
Beating
title.
Lance Stroll off pole.
So yeah, if he does that,
You okay?
wow.
Oh.
Sorry, there was something.
Yeah. No worries.
So if he ends up at the end of 2020, he has 7 titles. I think he has the most wins, most poles, and everything. If
Should
at
have
that time
retired.
if he retired, do you think his position in the top 10 F1 drivers would be much higher than where it is right now?
Yep.
So basically,
Because it's
do you
just
think
like
he's
I
basically
think you'd
tarnishing
still
his
have.
own legacy?
Yeah, because I think you'd still have the open questions of like, oh, how much of it was the car? Because obviously in F1, so much of it is the car. But like, you know, how much of it, like, would he have performed in these situations? But those all become complete, like, what ifs. Well, what if he did this and what if he did that? And your judgment is down to what he actually did, which sets him very, very highly on that ranking because of what he achieved. But now a lot of those what ifs have been answered. Like, what if he was in a difficult, tricky car to drive that wasn't developed around him? What if, you know, he was in these situations? What if he had a better teammate, like, you know, who was actually backed by the team and so on? And we don't need to answer those questions anymore because he'd lose. It's been answered. So, like, look, the thing is, I just think, yeah, like, his peak for me, and it still stands, was 2018. It was one of the best performances from Lewis I've seen. 2021, I think he fought brilliantly as well with Verstappen. Like, it was so it's not like he's way off his peak then, but he just couldn't. I think realistically, after 2021, I know why he didn't. I get it. But like 2022, he should have seen like, okay, I can't drive these cars anymore. Like, it's time to go. His adaptability just, it's been the same thing since 2022. Just, it's the same complaints, the same problems, the same bad driving. And I just don't think it's going to change. And he may get very lucky, and he'd have to get very fucking lucky, because there's two things. He may get lucky that the 2026 cars suit his style better, but then he also has to get lucky that Ferrari do their job. And I don't think both of those things can happen.
There's a third thing.
Oh, and that Leclerc fucks up as well. Yeah. Which he's not at the moment.
Exactly. I think it was 2021 or something when I had done a video on Lewis Hamilton, that why he was not the GOAT. And there were 5 or 6 critiques that I'd actually talked about. One of them was the teammate thing. Second was the fact that, look, if you have to look back at Lewis's career from 2007 to now, what are the years where you can actually say that he was the best driver on the grid?
So
2007?
Maybe, yeah. But the problem I have with 2007 is like there's Raikkonen exists, and I think he did a brilliant job. And 2, because of all the shit behind the scenes going on and the fact that Alonso was being dumped at the end of the season, I don't think we got a real measure of like the best Alonso versus Hamilton.
Best Lewis, yeah.
You know, like, well, even like the best Alonso versus a rookie Lewis. And this is the point of like, I agree that Lewis's rookie season shows that Lewis is a top tier driver. Like, I'm not arguing that.
Yeah.
I just don't think that is a fair analysis, because everyone's like, oh, well, this is rookie season versus a 2-time world champion. It's like, yeah, sure. But the same people will also say, oh, well, you know, Mercedes were sabotaging Lewis against George. It's like, well, if you're going to make that argument, then I can make a pretty fucking good argument that McLaren was sabotaging Alonso in 2007. You know,
They had good
like if
reason.
we're gonna fucking talk about that
Reason
argument,
worth 100 million.
yeah. And then like 2008, like
No, that was not a good season.
no, like this is the thing. Like, I know, right? There's the people who are like, oh well, the argument is, oh, Massa was shit. Which I don't think Massa was shit. I think he changed very much after the big crash that he had, like, you know. But it's like, oh, well, that Ferrari was miles ahead of the McLaren. I'm like, I don't think it was that far ahead of the McLaren. Like, I think they were pretty close, those cars. And that kind of tells me, it's like, so are we saying that, like, Lewis Hamilton and Massa are kind of on the same level of driving ability. That's not like, no one's going to tell you that is like, oh, Massa's one of the all-time greats, because no one's making that fucking argument, are they? Let's be honest here.
Yeah.
And then 2010, 2011, 2012, him and Jenson Button were pretty on par. Like, you know, like there's not much between them. Let's be honest here. Like it ebbed and flowed between the two of them. And again, I never rate Jenson as one of the all-time greats either. Like, I think he was lucky to get the right car to get a championship. Otherwise, he was gone, realistically.
Yeah.
So that's not a great argument. He beat Bottas. Fair enough. And like the biggest teammate battle for me, to be honest, over the last like 15 years for Lewis. This is going to piss a lot of Lewis fans off, and I'm here for it. But like the biggest battles were Russell and Rosberg in reality then. If we want to, you know, pierce it down to like who are two drivers. Yeah, like, but that's like, this is the thing, like Button was brilliant, but he also did win his title based purely, let's be honest here, on luck of getting the right car. Like Button was never in a position to win a title before that. Like, and he wasn't on track to. I thought Button was a great driver, but I never thought, oh, he's going to be a future like world champion. This guy can fucking take it. I don't know.
This might be a hot take, but I think in 2014, if it was Button instead of Rosberg, I think Button wins the title.
Maybe, sure.
Because he's a pathetic qualifier, Button. Mm-hmm. But Jesus, how brilliant
he's great
in the races.
Yeah, he's great in the races. But
and
like
he knew how to.
But he's not one of the all-time greats, right?
I don't think he is.
No, and that's my point. That's my point.
I don't think Rosberg is either.
No, neither do I.
Yeah,
like I wouldn't have Rosberg in my top 10 list of all time either. We did this, and I didn't have him in my top 10 list. So like beating Rosberg is kind of like okay, fair enough. And then like you get George Russell, who I think is probably one of the best drivers on the grid right now, and George Russell beat him. But George Russell beat him. Like you know, people throw the points and stuff around. It's like, yeah, but I mean that's very easy to show. If we look over any metric other than points, George Russell beat him. Just flat out beat him over the 3 seasons together. And you can look at points and you're like, yeah, but that all comes down to one disqualification and one DNF. If you change those two things, even if you said Hamilton still wins, he still cleared him by like 30, 40 points over the 3 seasons. Yeah. So you're talking a guy who hasn't got a championship to his name versus a 7-time world champion, and he beat him on basically every metric. And you have to then argue that, oh, well, it's sabotage and all these things. Great, cool. Now what's the fucking excuse at Ferrari? And
adaptation.
And the last thing I'll say on this is Gary Anderson, brilliant guy. May have mentioned him a couple of times on this podcast. He actually said in this technical thing. No, I've always really liked it because he just says what he thinks, and he doesn't. Yeah. He seems like a guy who doesn't read the comments or listen to people because he just doesn't seem to care what anyone thinks. He's like, yeah, he just needs to fucking adapt better. You know, it's just like he just came in. He's like, Lewis. He essentially what he said was, Lewis doesn't seem to be able to adapt to the car, and Leclerc's just coming in, grabbing the car by the balls, and kind of he had a race or two where he clearly wasn't comfortable, and then just got comfortable and started driving. And he said, if I was the team boss at Ferrari, I'd be asking questions because surely a 7-time world champion should be able to adapt to a new car, and Lewis can't do that. So either he's over the hill and can't do it, and I don't know if he said this last part, but essentially his idea was either he's over the hill and can't adapt anymore, or he was only adaptable because Mercedes could pull the car towards him and Ferrari aren't putting the car towards him. Yeah. So he's like, it's one of those two things. And that was like kind of him going, it's either Lewis can't adapt or Lewis could never adapt, basically, you know?
Exactly.
So
I think, and you know, that's the whole thing with the entire, and look, stats, great stats. Amazing. Most successful driver ever. I'll give it to him. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's the greatest F1 driver, and I've said it quite a few times. Michael lost to his teammate for 3 seasons, and he did that after he first of all retired, was away for 4 years, broke his neck, came back injured in a Formula 1 that was entirely different, and then he lost to Rosberg for 3 consecutive seasons. Mm-hmm. Lewis is on his way to losing to a 4th teammate. So while people can be very, very happy about the fact that he has had better teammates, it means jack shit if you're losing to all of
If
them.
look, you've just summed it up perfectly there. If you want to say someone's the greatest of all time, and your argument is, oh well, they've had really great teammates. It's like, yeah, but they've lost to 4 of those teammates at points over
Pretty
their
much all of them.
career.
Other than
Yeah,
Bottas and Kovalainen, he beat
and
every time.
Kovalainen was one of the greats. Let's
Yeah,
remember that. But yeah,
the
your
best
argument
to
is
come from Finland.
he's one of the greatest of all times. So then you are stuck in a box of having to argue that Rosberg, Button, and George Russell are the Rosberg,
Yeah,
Button,
yeah.
George Russell are
Now
the
Charles Leclerc.
are the greatest drivers of all time. Because otherwise, your argument is that those drivers were able to beat the greatest driver of all time, which I think would pretty quickly bring you to the decision of, oh, well, he must not be the greatest driver of all time then.
Exactly.
Like that's
That's
the
the thing.
only,
Yeah. And
what makes Schumacher great is the fact that he won those titles and then went to a shitty team like Ferrari and
yeah,
built it back up around him with all those and stuck through all the pain and fucking
yeah.
built it up again. And Lewis didn't do that. He bailed on
Lewis
Ferrari.
has left teams as soon as things got bad. He left McLaren. He's
Thank
left
you for saying it out
Mercedes.
loud. Because yes,
Yeah,
unfortunately that's what he's done. Look,
yeah.
the simplest
Which
way
is
to
not,
sum up
which
stats.
is, by the way, which is not a bad thing. I won't say it's a bad thing because that's what most drivers do. But that's simply what Michael did not do, and that's what made him great.
There's 2 things you need to do to get big stats in F1. Because F1 is car and team first and then driver. You need to make really good career decisions and you need to beat your teammate. And you could say that Hamilton definitely did one of those things. And
Yeah,
for a lot of his career, he did the other. So if you were to actually look at like how often Lewis had the fastest car, his stats actually don't look that great.
they don't.
Like his world championships do, because he
Yeah,
maximized for most of the seasons where he had a good car, right?
exactly.
To give him credit on that. But his win rate's like 50%. So that is why Hamilton fans then have to argue, oh well, he had brilliant teammates. But it's like, yeah, but none of those brilliant teammates are anywhere near greatest of all time drivers. Nowhere
They are
near.
Bottas.
Yeah, and they're
Yeah,
Bottas.
that's the whole thing.
Whereas like
It's
Schumacher beat every teammate every time.
I
And the
actually
argument then
made this
is
calculation,
Schumacher
by
had
the
shit
way.
teammates, but
Precisely. And I'd done this calculation just a few days back. There was this thread going on where someone said that Lewis Hamilton did not have 11 years as the fastest car. And it's true, he did not have 11 years. He had
10,
10
right?
years. Yeah.
Oh
You know
god.
what's the closest a driver comes with that many? It's Prost, who had 7.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, he didn't have 7. It's Prost and Michael. Both of them had 6 years. Prost won the
Yeah.
title 4 times. He lost 2, which was one to Lauda and to Senna. Michael won 5 titles with the fastest Ferrari. The 2 in Benetton was not the fastest car.
It was
He
just
lost
illegal.
one to Alonso. He lost one to Alonso in 2006. So that's the gap. And if Michael, again, no one should do this if thing, but if Michael had 10 years with the fastest car, he was not losing titles.
No.
As plain and simple.
Yeah.
By the way, neither was Vettel, neither was Alonso.
Yeah.
Just to put it out there.
One of the funniest arguments I saw the other day, though, was just like it was someone brought up the Massa thing. I think it was in that thread that you commented on, because they
Oh,
said like
okay,
the
okay.
Ferrari was fastest, and that's why
Should I
Massa
share?
was so close. And I'm like,
I
there
I blew
wasn't
my
that big
lid.
of a difference. Yeah.
I blew my lid. You know why? Because apparently someone made an argument that this is not the case because the Ferrari was definitely at least 2 to 3 tenths faster than the McLaren. And my question was, how can you make this assertion? He said,
Mm-hmm.
look, Alonso was teamed up with both Massa and Raikkonen, and he was 2 to 3 tenths faster. And my argument to that was, okay, Leclerc is teamed up with Lewis Hamilton right now, and Lewis is around half a second slower. So is Lewis Hamilton half a second faster than Fernando Alonso, and maybe around 8 or 9 tenths faster than Kimi Raikkonen? Like, does context matter in anything in our life? You are
No.
taking Kimi Raikkonen of 2007 and comparing him with Kimi Raikkonen of 2014, where when Ferrari was a shit box, but the car was built around Alonso.
Yeah.
These are two different scenarios.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
that kind of mental gymnastics that I hate.
cannot say this enough to F1 people. Just the car and team are so important. Like they are 90% of it. So if you take, like, you cannot just compare those two without taking into account all of the different things that are behind the scenes, all the different context, as you said. Like it needs to be taken into account. I guess sticking to this season though. So Hamilton washed.
I won't say he's washed. I think
No.
I think
it's the end of his career though. I think it's over.
I think he retires in 2026 because Ferrari is going
Yeah.
to put together a fuck all car, which is
Yeah, yeah.
basically what Ferrari does. I don't think he has a hope in hell to win a title this season. I think he retires as a 7-time world champion.
Do you think it's going to hurt him if it's George Russell that wins the title in 2026? Because essentially he gave up
I know a lot of people it's going to hurt. So,
he gave up on the team essentially.
yeah.
Instead
Kick them
of
to
like
the curb. Yeah.
yeah.
In every which way. And it's highly likely. By the way, there's only one person that actually predicted this right. Vettel was asked last season who's going to be the next world champion after Max, and he said George.
George Russell. Yeah.
Fucker knows. He knows a thing or two
Unless
about
Oscar
Formula
wins this year. Yeah.
One. Yeah. Orlando.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If Lando
think
wins
that
the
is because-
championship, Twitter's going to be fun.
Oh god, yeah.
Well,
I
he
mean,
only
just for
won because he
that,
had the
I'd love to
fastest car. It's like, well, how shit is Piastri then? You know, like it's going to be so funny because if Lando does manage to turn this around and win, those Oscar people are going to have to simultaneously say, well, Lando's a midfield driver at best, while also arguing why Oscar lost the championship to him. So it's going to be like,
No.
Yeah.
It's McLaren is British, Lando is British. So
Yeah.
sabotage. Yeah.
so yeah, like, I mean, I just don't think.
I think the biggest thing in here in the entire situation is even look, Alonso might be in a bad situation as well in his career because we don't know how good he is right now. He's beating Lance and he'll continue to beat Lance even when he's 55.
I think the problem is
how elite is he right now? So,
yeah, and the problem that also is just like someone commented when I said like, look, they just clearly Lewis can't adapt to these regulations. The initial points was, oh, you're clearly racist because you're not bringing up Alonso. My argument to that is simply, first of all, fuck off, you weirdo. Get out of my feed. Don't come back. I actually did say, don't come back, stop being racist on my podcast. But then the second argument was, well, I don't need to argue that because this is the first 5 races in this era where Alonso hasn't been clearly capable in the car and beating his teammate. Like this is the...
Wait, what are you talking about?
No, I'm saying that basically Lewis Hamilton, for the entirety of this regulation set, has essentially been like
No,
been
that
beaten
is fine.
basically.
I'm talking about Alonso.
No, what I'm saying with Alonso is this person was essentially saying, well, if you're giving out about Lewis and not being able to adapt and so on, they're essentially saying, well, what about Alonso? And my argument was
Alonso
simple.
has
Like
been brilliant.
this was my simple argument. What I'm saying is, sure, and if we were talking about Lewis Hamilton only being bad for the last 4 races, then this argument would be over the top. But Alonso has been brilliant for the last 3 seasons, and he's had a couple of bad races this season, so it's too early to say, like, oh, well, Alonso's washed. It's like, no. Like, in 2023, he got a podium in every weekend where the car was good. Like, it's
And
only been...
even one when the car wasn't. Brazil.
Yes. Yeah. And last season, compared to his shit teammate, was still brilliant. Whereas this has been like 3 or 4 races so far. If
He's been
Alonso is...
good.
Wait.
He's been good. He's 4.
He's
I
just-
think if 4-1
It's
or
because
something
he's
in
pointless, so
qualifying.
it's easy because these people just like to live in stats instead of taking any sort of context.
Yeah.
So, of course.
Yeah.
But my argument was just like, fine. And if this was Lewis Hamilton's first season being shit, you'd be like, right, well, he's adapting to the team. It's fine. But he's been beaten by his teammate now for this entire regulation set. So I think it's time to start asking questions. And Alonso's not in that situation. If Alonso was beaten by Stroll last year, I'd be like, yeah, okay, right, it's probably fucking over.
Done. Yeah.
Fine. But that's not the situation. And that's why it was just like, as soon as I say that back, immediately the answer is, no, you're just racist. And I'm like, right, well, you're not a real person. Then. Please leave. Please leave. And basically I was like, by the way, you're the one being racist because you brought race into this first. I was talking about Hamilton's skills, not his skin color, which is the
Yeah.
conversation we're trying to fucking have here. Racist. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel bad for Lewis Hamilton fans, but yeah, the kind of mental gymnastics that they've had to do these days, it's been a
It's
bit,
just
yeah.
if they had have just done what we did, it would have been much easier. Which is, we just said Lewis Hamilton is a brilliantly quick driver who has been able to basically. The reason I think that Verstappen is closer to like Schumacher and Senna is because Verstappen shows up every single weekend, whereas Hamilton was more calculated, strung it out over a season, brought it home when he needed to.
Yeah.
Spectacular racing driver. If you just left it at that, it was like, yes, one of the all-time greats. We can argue about how you feel about where he is. That's all fine. But instead, they have to argue that, no, he's brilliant. And if he ever loses, it's because the team is fucking around. Now you've put yourself into a little corner where you have to basically argue racism because there is no other argument. Like,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah. Oh, Ferrari must be racist. Yeah, sure. That's why they're spending 80 million euros a year to have him in. That's what a racist would do. Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
It's going to be fun. I mean, the whole, yeah, more pain incoming, Team LH. There's going to be a lot
100%.
of it.
I think
Yeah.
Leclerc is only going to get faster as well because Leclerc
That's the
seems to
whole
now be
thing.
getting on top of it.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Miami.
Yeah.
First of all, I actually had a question about this, and I asked a lot of people on X and Threads as well. What's your view on having Miami as a night race? Better or worse?
Yeah, I think good idea. Also, because I think it would bring some more drivers into the mix. Because I think Mercedes have problems with hot tires, don't they? But yeah, no, I just genuinely think it'd be a better race, more of a spectacle because it is. I thought it might be a decent track, but it's not great, is it? Yeah. So like, if we just a night race would at very least give us some sort of spectacle, Yeah, maybe put some alligators on track. That could help. Some crocodiles,
The problem is, first of all, the whole blue shade that was supposed to be great and epic, it's not. It doesn't look that good.
No.
The whole track and everything, it's fine. It's not great. The track layout isn't. It's nothing.
It would be much better at night, and then in the background you'd get to see all of Pablo Escobar's towers behind him, which would look great.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole bit is with the night
Miami
race.
was built on drugs. Drugs are sold at night.
Everyone knows.
It should be a night race.
It's still
Yeah.
running. I mean, it's still. Yeah, I'm not going to get into
Running
that.
on drugs and COVID escapees, basically, is what you're trying to say. God, you're such a racist. Yeah, anyway.
I apologize. And it's the whole. You know what a night race will do? First of all, it will mask all the hideousness that is there. I don't like the track and the look of the whole thing at all. So the night is actually going to mask.
You're just like, this is going to be a shit race. Can we just make it look good at least? It'd be nice. Like,
yeah, exactly. That's my whole thing.
Yeah.
At least make it look good.
Watch now
Plus-
as we get like the most epic race on Sunday.
By the way, it's expected to rain, and since we've said
Thunderstorms.
that it is
Yeah.
40% chance, but plus also the best
With
thing
no
would
wet
be if it is
tires.
a night race. The best thing would be it would be at a decent time for me to watch. 2 a.m. The race
Okay.
start at 2 a.m.
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 p.m. for me, so I'm okay.
Oh fuck!
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the worst possible time.
Because I'm in Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the pecking order. What do you think it's going to be this time?
I think this is going to be a struggle session for Red Bull this weekend, maybe. I don't think this is going to be a great track for Red Bull. I think Ferrari could be better this weekend. I have a feeling, though, it could be a McLaren kind of easy track for them to kind of come home with. But I wouldn't be surprised if Mercedes are kind of in the mix this weekend as well. I reckon their car could go well around here. So I'm going to say McLaren followed closely by Mercedes. On pace, it should be Ferrari as long as they run correct tires and wings and shit, which isn't out of the question. And then I think Red Bull, could be off the back. Saying that, like, it wouldn't be surprising if Red Bull fix something because they seem to be quite good at pulling shit out of their arse this year. So maybe they'll prove us wrong, but that's what I would expect in terms of.
I think it might be. I think it might be just McLaren dominance because every time the temps have actually jumped to a certain level, they've been unreal. They're just
And it's
gone
going to
off.
be unreasonably hot this time of year as well. Like
Yeah,
it's, I mean,
exactly.
I'm in Mexico. I'm a little bit further south, obviously, but like it's already reaching like 35 degrees for me. So it's getting to that time of year where it's going to start jumping, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Softer compounds of tires, so maybe that'll help in
hopefully,
terms of
yeah.
overtaking rain. I really hope it rains. At
Yeah.
least it'll make the whole thing a
As
bit
long
more
as it's not
palatable.
like so much rain that they just fucking cancel the race because that's very on form.
Yeah, no, please, no,
Yeah.
not that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's already starting at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm already, these are the races that actually test my fandom in Formula One
Yeah.
because they start at such late hour, and it's not only about the fact that it starts late. Okay, it'll end at 3:30 a.m. It's not that it is ending at 3:30 a.m. At that point, I have to assign articles to my writers who have to write, and
Yeah,
then I
like
have to write myself.
you'd almost prefer that most of the races for me start at like 5 or 6 a.m. I think that's the kind of thing where you could adjust to where you're like, okay, well I can sleep, get up at 4, get
Yeah,
everything done, finish my
yeah,
work
yeah,
day early. Big,
exactly. That'll be
but you've
fine.
got the opposite. Yeah. Yeah.
It's nowhere.
Yeah.
It's basically, I mean, I'll basically be sitting here and be looking at the sun. Just that's the whole thing it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to Miami. Who's your top three
Mm,
for the sprint and the race?
okay.
Yeah, we have a sprint weekend.
For the sprint, it's going to be Oscar Piastri, sprint specialist,
Hmm.
followed by Lewis Hamilton, sprint specialist. No, I'm kidding. No, it's going to be. It's going to be.
I actually thought you were serious.
No, I'm going to do. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Piastri, Leclerc, Lando for the sprint,
Look, Lando, okay.
and then I'm going to say for the main race, I am not putting Lando at the top anymore until he otherwise proves me wrong. So sorry, Lando, but that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to say it's going to be Piastri, Russell, Leclerc on the podium, and we start getting a nice mix up of the title swinging.
I hope it happens.
Mm.
I would even say Russell, Leclerc, and Kimi, because
Yeah.
that'll make it even more
Oh
fun.
yeah. If we could get a DNF from both McLarens to kind of bring
And
the
Red
title.
Bull as well. No,
yeah.
okay, let's keep Max as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, by the way, get all three DNF and then you have the entire thing bunched up. Amazing.
Yeah.
So considering it might be the sprint is supposed to be dry, so I think it's going to be a McLaren 1-2. I think Oscar wins, Lando second, Leclerc third, maybe George, cause Ferrari, who the fuck knows what turns up with them? Who really no clue. In the race, I think if it's going to be wet, I think Max wins, and Lando second, and probably George third. That's if it is wet. If it is dry, I think Oscar, Lando, and Leclerc.
Okay.
Yeah.
And final question for this weekend: who will be further off their teammate in qualifying, Lance Stroll or Lewis Hamilton?
Yeah, Lewis.
I hate to say it, but I agree. And you know what? That's going to be seen as a dig on
Let's make it
Alonso,
three
isn't it?
options. Let's make it three options. Lando, not Lando. Lewis,
Lando
Yuki,
as well,
and Lance.
given recent form. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Now-
you know what? Actually, forget about the Lance one because that Aston. I don't know what the peak performance is, so it may be a case of there's no performance there. So let's pick with the top teams.
Yeah.
Will it be Lewis, Lando, who has recently not been having great qualifyings? Lewis, Lando, or Yuki? I think it's going to be Lewis. Yeah.
Lewis. I think Yuki does well. I think Yuki might be maybe a couple of tenths off Max. What we've seen is it's basically just the final Q3 lap that he's not able to nail.
It's the
right
last
now.
kind of nailing of that, the car. Yeah. It's when
He's
it gets
good.
into that peak performance window.
Yeah,
He's just,
Yuki is good.
yeah.
I'm surprised, but I'm happy for him. I mean,
So we
such a
saying
wonderful
Yuki
kid.
Lindblad lineup for 2026 then?
Depends. By the way, guys, everyone, keep an eye for Freddie Slater, the name that we first heard from Josh River. Apparently, another Verstappen in the making. So let's see what he does.
Interesting.
He's 16.
Okay.
Arvid Lindblad is 17. Kimi is 18. And
Yeah.
these three are probably going to be your next trio of
Okay.
top drivers that come in.
Do us a favor as well, guys. For the next podcast, I want to fill up the dinosaur with questions. So please put them in the comments or ping us on X or something. I forgot to ask about them, but for next weekend, like maybe ping them after the Miami Grand Prix or whatever your biggest questions, and we'll take them out of here.
Yeah. Also, do us another favor. Mom, dad, sister, brother, wife, kid, take their phones and hit subscribe.
Actually, an even bigger thing than that as well. If you could, if you're listening to this on audio, please do leave a review as well. It really helps. And yeah,
Help us grow the numbers. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Bye.